The H1B Guy here, and today, the H1B Guy news for the week ending August 14th, 2020. If you haven't already, I'd like to go ahead and ask you to subscribe to the H1B Guy channel. Really appreciate all the support that I've received over the last few weeks, and your subscription helps me to continue to produce content like this. Now, let's get to the news. I wanted to go back to an article that was written at the beginning of July because we've skipped really a lot of the discussion around L1s, other than a few mentions recently here on this channel. So on July 6th, on an article that was written by Shelly Banjo for Bloomberg titled, "Trump's Visa Ban is Already Hurting Some Tech Job Growth." Quote, most of the headlines around President Trump's suspension of immigrant visas last month centered on H-1Bs, but there's a category that Trump suspended at the same time, L-1 visas, which are meant for executives and specialized employees at foreign companies. For example, a Volkswagen AG boss could visit the German automaker's Tennessee car plant, or a Sony Corp exec could spend time with some of the Japanese tech company's 15,000 U.S. employees. Now, U.S. immigration rules are chipping away at the country's allure for global founders. Building a business in Silicon Valley might have been the wisest thing to do 10 years ago, but today the U.S. is sending a clear signal to look elsewhere. While this site focuses primarily on, the H-1B visa, and here on this channel, we talk a lot about the H-1B visa. We have discussed the L1, both A and B here in the past. And the thing that I keep coming back to are the overall L1 approval numbers for fiscal year 2020. If you remember, those numbers were 35,228 L1s were approved in fiscal year 2020, which was less than half of what was approved in fiscal year 2019. It's clearly evident that the L1's usage was trending downward in 2020, even before the pandemic. This is, to me, a very clear signal sent very loud and clear over the last 4 years that the current administration stance is one that is tough on immigration and overall difficult on temporary foreign workers. At the end of the article, the statement that says the U.S. is sending a clear signal to look elsewhere, that has been something that we've talked about here on this channel a good bit. And for me, it's really concerning. And I think that is the bigger picture of what's at stake here. Which brings us to an article that was shared by @EVGuy7 on the H1B Guy Twitter feed earlier this week. On August 10th, an article written by Ted Hesson for Reuters titled, "Tech Giants Back Legal Challenge to Trump's Foreign Worker Restrictions." Quote, global competitors in Canada, China, and India, among others, are pouncing at the opportunity to attract well-trained, innovative individuals, the brief reads, and American businesses are scrambling to adjust hiring needed talent to work in locations outside our nation's borders. Wow. Where have you heard this opinion before? Does this sound familiar? I'm pretty sure it does, since EVGuy7 shared it with me on my Twitter feed. Admittedly, I love to be right. I just do. I think that that's one of the things about me that I love, and that's to be right. But the thought of losing American jobs to outsourcing just isn't something that I really fundamentally agree with. And I think that it's very glaring here when we see this come up. When these tech giants start to say, hey, we're looking at other avenues, very scary. Especially considering that the message being sent by President Trump and the current administration is one of rhetoric that is protecting American jobs. I'm all for that. I think we need to protect American jobs. We need to protect American workers. Yes, 100% I agree with that. But I want to protect American jobs by not losing them to Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Philippines, China, India, anywhere else that outsourcing centers are established. Let's keep those jobs here in our borders, and let's keep American workers employed. Let's not offshore, nearshore, outsource these roles. Let's keep them here. And so the big one that dropped this week on August 12th of 2020 in a news release from the Department of State. I'm going to read some of this and then I'm going to break it down here at the end. But the press release was titled National Interest Exceptions to Presidential Proclamations 10,014 and 10,052, suspending the entry of immigrants and non-immigrants presenting a risk to the United States labor market during the economic recovery following the 2019 novel coronavirus outbreak. Quote, for travel as a public health or healthcare professional or researcher to alleviate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, or to conduct ongoing medical research in an area with a substantial public health benefit, travel supported by a request from U.S. government agency or entity to meet critical U.S. foreign policy objectives or to satisfy treaty or contractual obligations, travel by applicants seeking to resume ongoing employment in the United States in the same position with the same employer and visa classification, travel by technical specialists, senior level managers, and other workers whose travel is necessary to facilitate the immediate and continued economic recovery of the United States. Consular officers may determine that an H-1B applicant falls into this category when two of the following 5 indicators are present. 1. Petitioning employer has continued need, establishes an LCA timeline of July 2020. 2. Provides significant and unique contributions to an employer meeting a critical infrastructure need. Very broad list of industries provided. 3. Wage rate paid to the H-1B applicant meaningfully exceeds the prevailing wage rate by at least 15%. 4. H-1B applicants' education, training, and or experience demonstrate unusual expertise in the specialty occupation. And 5. Denial of the visa pursuant to Presidential Proclamation 10,052 will cause financial hardship to the U.S. employer. Wow, so we really here see the outlining of what exceptions are going to be granted, for H-1Bs that are currently outside of the U.S. It really is amazing what happens when lawsuits are filed. Very clearly, what we see here is what I believe to be a proactive response from the administration to the pressure stemming from Panda v. Wolf lawsuit. So let's cover the 5 criteria and my interpretation of what they mean. Remember, as an H-1 outside of the U.S. going through consular processing, meaning an appointment, you're going to have to meet 2 of these 5 in order to be approved for entry. So 1. Any LCAs approved before July 2020 will be up to the consulate's processing officer's direction and discretion as to whether or not there is a continuing need. Very scary that this really is the interpretation of the PO here. Full authority granted to that badge number. 2. Consulate's processing officer's discretion if the position is unique and vital to management and success of business or a specialty occupation that will provide a significant and unique contribution. Again, that badge number for the PO becomes the ultimate authority in whether or not the H-1B will be granted entry based on the stamping process. Very interesting here for bullet point number 2. And to me, here is a big one, that the H-1B must be paid 15% above the prevailing wage determination. So the list of questions that surrounds this one is really far and wide, especially if you consider some individuals who have been outside of the U.S. for months now and haven't been paid and don't have a paycheck within the last 60 days that would even validate or verify this 15% above the prevailing wage determination based on the LCA. I'm not really sure how this one's going to be regulated, other than if it was somebody who decided to take travel sometime in May or June before the travel ban was imposed. I would think those individuals are going to be in this bucket, but ultimately this is probably going to be a fairly small percentage. Although my experience with LCAs and actual salaries, I would say generally when I was managing the immigration program that we were generally 10 to 20% above prevailing wage on average across the board. 4, the H-1B's education, training, and/or experience demonstrates unusual expertise. So again, it goes back to your SIC job code, right? Engineers, programmers, developers, architects, coders. I would think that they are in line, doctors, medical professionals, even educators in this case. But if you're a computer systems analyst, I'd be very afraid right now if I'm located outside of the country. 5, denial will cause financial hardship to the U.S. employer. So the interesting thing about sort of these 5 criteria is that it really has empowered the consulate's processing officer, and it's really like as if they didn't already have enough authority in this situation. Here we see the ramifications of forcing the Department of State to allow entry of temporary foreign workers with approved visas that are currently located outside of the U.S. They now have in tune empowered the consulate's processing officers, who have even more ability to approve or deny entry at their discretion based on this new criteria for the exception cases. If you are currently located outside of the U.S. and intend to book a consulate appointment, I cannot implore to you enough. Listen to me. Make sure that you have the appropriate documents from your employer and that you will exceed the 2 minimum criteria for the categories, okay? And if I am a third-party subcontract on a third-party end client and I'm located outside of the U.S. and going through this process, I'm really concerned for you guys right now. I think that you are going to see very much a microscope put on your case, scrutinized, looking for additional documentation and support from the employer, that end client, the client's site, that's going to validate this need. And I don't think that a lot of you are going to be able to produce that based on the time that you've been away. And it's just unfortunate that you're caught in this gap. And if I'm you, I would be very careful about going through this consulate process until you have all of the documents in line. Otherwise, I believe that you're going to put your status and ability to re-enter into the U.S. at significant risk. With that being said, though, this is great news, especially for those that apply and are granted based on this exception. I look forward to hearing about some success stories based on this new mandate. If this is you, and in the next few weeks, if you're watching this and you've gone through and gotten the approval and plan to return to the U.S., please drop me a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And then finally, we are going to wrap up this week with an article that was written on August 13th, 2020, written by Stuart Anderson for Forbes, titled Immigrant-Founded Zoom Playing Big Role During COVID-19 Crisis. Quote, after attending university, Eric Wan wanted to work in America but encountered a problem. He couldn't get a visa. Quote, I decided to come to the U.S. in the mid-90s because of the internet, which I knew was the wave of the future, he said. It was red hot here, but hadn't yet taken off in China. The first time I applied for a U.S. visa, I was rejected. I continued to apply again and again over the course of 2 years and finally received my visa on the 9th try. Quote, immigrants have started more than half, 50 out of 91 or 55% of American startup companies valued at $1 billion or more, and key members of management or product teams in more than 80% of these companies, according to a study. Zoom was one of these companies. Wow, if that just doesn't hit you right in the gut and tell you how important and how critical these issues that we've been talking about on this channel over the last few weeks really are. Zoom has been one of the tech companies at the forefront of COVID-19. Zoom has been a big part of changing the way we live, we work, and we communicate. Not only with people that we work with, but our friends and our family. Literally, there's a term called Zoom fatigue now. It's in our vernacular. And that's based on the amount of participation in Zoom calls that we've done over the last 4 or 5 months. Mr. Wan's story, and the number of times that he tried and failed to gain admission into the U.S. just resonates with a lot of followers of this channel and of the H1BGuy.com. A lot of natives have forgotten what the true and real American dream is, and that there are thousands of individuals every year attempting to gain entry into our great country. What happens if we continue to restrict, prohibit, and suppress these individuals? America loses. It's pretty simple. Think about it. 55%, 50 out of 91 of America's startup companies that are valued over $1 billion were started by immigrants. That's just mind-boggling to me if you really think about that. What if instead of coming to the U.S., they migrated to Canada or Mexico or Costa Rica? Guess what? America loses. We lose jobs, we lose tax dollars, and we lose economic growth. We have to wake up. We cannot let that happen. So, just wanted to thank you guys again. That is the news for this week. Really appreciate all of you who have made it this far. I wanted to mention that I am really, really excited about what we have in store next week. Check back on Monday for an episode of the H1B Guy Recommends. But on Wednesday, I just cannot be more excited about what we have lined up. Look for an announcement early next week on Wednesday's plan. Again, just thank you all for the support. The full posts of this for the H1B Guy news will be on the H1BGuy.com as well. So you can please check that out, as well as all of our other articles and blogs that we've posted over the last few weeks. Just really appreciate all your support to the site and here to this channel. As always, if you can like this video, please subscribe to the H1B Guy and click the bell for notifications. The H1B Guy, your global source for all things H1B.